I'm really upset and disrespected by what Lou Holtz said publicly about our team and Ohio State and Buckeye Nation. And we're not going to stand for that. That's not even close to true. We had one bad half a couple years ago up in Ann Arbor. We did the second half. But every game we play in, we're physical. We are. I don't know where that narrative comes from.
Tell them, Ryan Day. You've come under so much criticism. People have been giving you a hard time, saying that you can't win games in the trenches. It has to go a certain way for you to be victorious. Man, flex. I'm great with it. I really am. I couldn't tell you how proud I was of the performance that I saw from Ohio State and finding a way to win in what was a crazy hostile environment, in a way that maybe a year ago, 2 years ago, maybe they don't win that way. They found a way, though, on Saturday. Welcome to Always College Football. I'm Greg McElroy, your host. Thanks so much for being with us, man. We really appreciate all the support that you've shown the show up to this point. Please continue to like by hitting that thumbs up button, rate the podcast wherever you get your podcast, and subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast. Well, it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, you name it. We really appreciate it. As we do every single Monday, we're going to go through and do the 10 things that we learned. I learned that defenses might actually win championships this year. I learned that young coaches occasionally make mistakes, but you should not write them off. I learned that coaches have a bravado right now and listen to everything that's said about their program. I also learned that the SEC West is a 3-horse race, and every single one of those 3 teams is trying to figure themselves out at the moment. I learned that the ACC consistently been a doormat, not the case this year. And I learned that the group of 5, G5, if you will, the non-autonomous 5, there might be a different conference on top so far. Let's not waste any additional time. We always start Mondays with our top 10, little AP poll reaction, but I'll give you my top 10, and I think there's a nugget in here that's probably going to surprise you. Monday edition, as always, we dive in to the AP poll just a little bit and tell you how I would tweak things just a little bit, okay? But a couple takeaways that you might want to take into account when evaluating this week's poll. Washington's up to number 7. That's the highest ranking for them since 2018. I ask you this, though, seriously, if Ohio State wore, garnet and gold, or crimson and cream, or crimson and white, or scarlet and gray, would their ranking not reflect that? Tell me that team's the 7th best team in the country based on what you've seen so far? I'll leave it at that. More on that in just a moment. Duke is up to number 17. That is their highest ranking since 1994, and they will play an AP ranked matchup for just the 3rd time since 95. It's the last 2 times they've played in a ranked matchup. Was in 2013. They lost both. They have not won an AP ranked matchup since 1994 against Virginia. That was almost 30 years ago. And that win by Duke against number 13, Virginia, at the time, is their only AP ranked matchup victory in their last 50 years. So a big one coming up this week, obviously, against Notre Dame. Kansas ranked at least once in the AP poll for consecutive seasons for the first time since 3 straight from 2007 to 2009. And 17 of the 21 undefeated Power 5 teams are in this week's AP poll. The 4 that aren't, Kentucky, which received 41 votes, Louisville 32, Maryland 20, and Syracuse 8. So that's kind of where things stand as of right now. Here's the way I would have them. Okay. I would have Washington at number 1. Just saying. Of all the teams in college football that I really don't want to play, Washington might be at the top of the list. Now, can they win a game in the trenches? Can they ground and pound? If the offense isn't firing the way it's fired in the first 4 weeks, can they still find a way to victory? I'm not so sure. I don't know that just yet. But I know I've watched Cal a couple times, and I know while Cal is not going to necessarily move the needle, they're better than you probably think. But for Washington to make mincemeat of them was pretty dang ridiculous. 59 points in a conference game. It's the most that they've scored since 2016. They've scored 40 points in each of their first 4 games, just the 2nd time in school history. The other time they did that was in 1944, so it's been a minute. 45 points in the first half of that football game was the most in a half in Washington history. They've done it 5 times previously. And then 199 points this season. It's the most through 4 games since scoring 199 through 4 games in 1971. This team is a juggernaut. Michael Penix took the field with a 14-point lead. The first time he stepped on the field, they had already built up a 2-touchdown lead over the Cal Bears. Washington, I think, is playing as well as anybody. And is there brand bias involved in the AP poll? Perhaps. But I'm telling you, man, there are not many teams in college football that are playing better than the Huskies right now. At number 2, I'd have Georgia. It's UAB. Can we take a lot from that game? I don't know. UAB scored 21. I thought that was pretty good, I guess. But Georgia, a little bit of a slow start at times this year. Still think if they play their best, they beat everybody. But that's something worth noting. At number 3, I have Ohio State. Ohio State played a game against Notre Dame that was really the way Notre Dame wanted it to be. They limited possessions. Ohio State had 8 possessions. Notre Dame had 7. There just weren't that many opportunities to score. And what I was most impressed with, perhaps, was at the end of the game, finding the way to steal that one on the road. They showcased mental toughness. We'll talk about all that here in just a minute. But I would have Ohio State at number 3 after what was, I think, a massive victory for Ryan Day and company. At number 4, I have the Texas Longhorns. Continue to look really impressive. They'll get a test this week against a ranked Kansas team. I want to see how their defense operates. It's a really good Kansas offense. I think it'll be a nice test for the Longhorns there in Austin. Florida State, I'd have it number 5. Florida State has dropped a couple of spots the last couple of weeks. Last week against Clemson, were they the better team? I don't know. I really don't know. Called the game. Have a ton of respect for Florida State. Defense made an opportunistic play, but the offense still, for whatever reason, it's just a little bit stop and start. Man, there's moments they look great, and there's moments where it's like, man, what the heck is going on? So a little bit inconsistent Florida State has been up to this point. I'd love to see them put 60 minutes together. I'm not sure we've seen it up to this point, but we've seen it in bunches, like the second half against LSU, where if they play like that, they can play with and beat just about anyone they play. At number 6, I have Penn State up to number 6. Very impressed with what they're doing defensively. I'll talk about that here again in just a minute. Number 7, I have Michigan dropping for me. You know I've loved Michigan for a long time. I've loved Michigan for a long time, dating all the way back to last year. But for whatever reason, there's just some inconsistencies right now with Michigan that have just me a little bit apprehensive about putting them up there at or near the top of the rankings. At number 8, I have Oregon, up quite a bit from where I've had them in the past. Was really impressed with what they did defensively, more so than what I saw from them offensively, but we'll talk about them in a minute. Utah's at 9, continue to just play ridiculous on the defensive side of the football. And then at number 10, how about the Washington State Cougars? How about it? Now, you're going to sit there and say, well, hang on, come on. Hot take artist, fine. If you want to get, if you want to be all about the brands, I'm fine with that. I get it. Washington State has not necessarily always been a team that's at or near the top, but I look at what their quarterback's doing right now. Talk about him in a while. Think about how they played for the most part throughout the course of the game. I mean, starting fast, pedal down against a group that's not really built to come from behind. Thoroughly impressed. It was one of the most impressive victories of the weekend, even though there was so much to clean up. I think Jake Dickert and company are doing an amazing job. So I actually have them in the top 10 right now. The AP polls definitely respecting the Cougs. I'd have them a little higher than where the AP has them right now. Have you ever dreamed of hitting the road in your very own customized Mercedes-Benz Sprinter? Follow college football all season long by hitting all the biggest games in college football's most celebrated stadiums. At ESPN, we dreamed that dream, and with the help of Mercedes-Benz, we made it happen. This year, our very own Jen Latta has teamed up with Mercedes-Benz designers to create a road-ready, fully functional, state-of-the-art podcast studio on wheels. The ride is pure Mercedes-Benz with all-wheel drive and the latest driver assistance, safety, and tech. The podcast studio must be seen and heard to be believed. A spacious and chill conversation space with mics, camera, and mixing board to capture the action. On board, Jen Latta will be interviewing some of the biggest names in college football. All points to Mercedes-Benz for always bringing some extra. Out back of the Sprinter, they're innovating, pushing the science of the tailgate, complete with grill, cooler, TV monitors, and more. This is hashtag van life meets the fan life. To get an inside look to this one-of-a-kind, blow-your-mind collaboration came together, visit mbvans.com/sprinterlabs. The Mercedes-Benz ESPN College Football Podcast Sprinter coming soon to a game near you. 10 things we learned. We do it every Monday. Always enjoy this practice. This is really a lot of fun for us. And we try to take, big picture discussion a little bit. We get in the weeds some. It's kind of all over the place. We kind of give a state of the union, if you will, every Monday on what we saw this past weekend in college football. But the number one thing I learned this past weekend is, with all the hype and comments surrounding Deion Sanders and the Colorado Buffaloes, we are reminded here that even in a 7-on-7 era of college football, in a spread offense, spread you out, get playmakers in space, score points, even in an era in which maybe the line has been devalued just a little bit, great teams are still built from the inside out. I mean, I'm talking elite teams. Now, can you win a lot of games with an average offensive line? Absolutely. Can you be an exciting team to watch with an average offensive line? No doubt about it. I still love watching Colorado. I still think they're going to be fun to watch. I still think they're going to score a lot of points. I still think they're going to do a lot of really nice things this year. I still think Deion Sanders and company are way ahead of schedule from what the preseason expectation was. Still thoroughly impressed with Shedeur Sanders. Still thoroughly impressed with all those guys, what they've done to this point. But if you're going to win big, if you're going to win championships, if you're going to chase the playoff, if you want to win your conference, you better be good up front, both along the offensive line and along the defensive line. I'm going to pull just a couple of stats for you, okay? I'm not going to get into the weeds of pressure rates and sacks given up and evaded tackles by the quarterback behind the line of scrimmage and all that stuff. That's all well and good. I'm fine with that. But it's long been documented that Shedeur Sanders and company, they've given up 1 million pressures. I mean, 1 million pressures. They have 22 sacks this year. It's the most sacks taken in the entire country. All right. And that's through the first 4 games. The most sacks taken by a Power 5 quarterback in the last 20 years. He's also been sacked 7 times in a game twice this year. So it was really fun, I think, for us to kind of follow the Colorado narrative a little bit. But when you start to go against teams that have legitimate playoff competition and legitimate playoff roster, they're going to have a tough time competing. So as they move forward, they got to identify guys in the trenches that can play at a really high level. Okay, enough about Colorado. Let's talk just a little bit more about the big picture of what an offensive line and a defensive line can do for you in the sport. Let's go back through it. All right, the Joe Moore Award. Feel how you want to feel about the Joe Moore Award, okay? If you're not familiar with the award, it goes to annually the top offensive line in the country. And I have a tremendous amount of respect for the Joe Moore Award and their committee, because every single guy on that committee played offensive line or coached offensive line at an insanely high level. And they take great pride in it. Cole Kublik is one of my best friends in the world. Have a ton of respect for him. He serves as a voting member of that committee. They have calls. They watch every offensive line in the country, every single one. And I'm talking from, Kent State all the way to Georgia. Like, they watch them all. I know that for a fact because Cole talks about Kent State offensive line or Central Michigan's offensive line or Boise's offensive line. Like, they're watching them all, okay? Here are the winners of the Joe Moore Award dating back to 2017. Okay, best offensive line in the country as voted on by people that are experts in the field. 2022, Michigan. They made the playoff. 2021, Michigan. They made the playoff. Obviously, they won the Big Ten as well in both 2021 and 2022. In 2020, the Joe Moore Award winner, Alabama. They won the national championship. 2019, the Joe Moore Award winner, LSU. They won the national championship. 2018, Oklahoma won the Joe Moore Award. They made the playoff. 2017, Notre Dame made the playoff. All right, we're talking about teams that consistently, or Notre Dame did not make the playoff in 17, but we're really close to making the playoff. Long story short, if you win the Joe Moore Award, with the best offensive line in the country, the likelihood, at least dating all the way back to 2018, you're making the playoff at worst. And then if you want to go back to 17, 16, 15, what have you, you're going to be within striking distance of the playoff. So the Joe Moore Award is an indicator. A great offensive line is an indicator of your team's future success and the ceiling of your team in general. Let's talk about the Outland Trophy, which traditionally goes to the best interior lineman. Basically, it's the Heisman for big guys, okay? 2022, Olu Oluwatini, center, Michigan. Their team went to the playoff. Jordan Davis was the winner in 21. Defensive tackle, Georgia, national champions. 2020, Alex Leatherwood, Alabama, left tackle, national champions. 2019, Penei Sewell, Oregon, Rose Bowl champions. 2018, Quinnen Williams, Alabama, defensive tackle, national championship runner-up. Here's the anomaly in the group. Ed Oliver won it in 2017. He, of course, played for Houston. They went 7-5. That's the anomaly. 2016, Cam Robinson, Alabama, national championship runner-up. Then 2015, Joshua Garnett played for Stanford. They won the Rose Bowl. So you look about it. If you have the best interior lineman and or the best collection of linemen, offensive line, Joe Moore Award, you're probably going to be pretty dang good. The game is still built, even though we've moved more towards quarterback, passing attack, great wide receivers, etc. The game, if you want to win big and be elite, you still have to be elite along the offensive and defensive lines. Takeaway number 2. Marcus Freeman, as a head coach, is still a little bit of a work in progress. Now, but be careful drawing conclusions about how good of a head coach he is. Because I think a lot of people are drawing conclusions. Well, Marcus Freeman lost that game. Marcus Freeman screwed it up. All this other stuff. Here were some of the questionable decisions that were made throughout the game that ultimately led to Ohio State pulling off what was a tremendous comeback. The screen on 2nd and long that allowed allowed Ohio State to preserve their final timeout. Now, this is a high percentage completion, okay? Sam Hartman's a veteran quarterback. You're going to trust your veteran quarterback. He tries to get a screen. It's almost intercepted, by the way, by JT Tuimoloau. It was a great play by him. But right there, you hand it off. You just had a nice run by Estime. Why wasn't Estime, this is the second bad decision, why wasn't Estime in the game in the final few offensive plays? I love what Jeremiah Love is going to become. I think he's an amazing player. But you have a slow mesh mistake with about 2 minutes and 28 seconds left. If Estime's in there, man, the bowling ball, just get him going. That's the type of back you want in the game when you're putting the game on ice. 230-pound downhill back that actually had played pretty well up to that point. I'm not 100% sure why he wasn't in the game. How about 3rd and 19 from the 22? Why are your defensive backs dropping into the end zone? Okay, you're playing zone. I can live with that. Eyes are in the backfield. I can live with that. But you know that if you're snapping the ball offensively at the 22-yard line, your quarterback's at the 27. He's probably dropping to the 30 to be able to deliver the ball. That means the ball, in order to be thrown over your head, has to travel 40 yards in the air, just about. And you telling me the defensive backs can't run 10 yards in the time that a ball travels 40 yards? 100% they can. I would have had my defensive backs with my heels on the goal line. They would not have given up 1 inch in retreat. I would have just planted. I would have called it's what we call a picket fence defense. Basically, all your defensive backs have their heels at the line to gain, and they don't back up at all. Because guess what? If it's thrown over their head, they can turn around and run 10 yards in the time the ball can travel that far. So I thought that was a big mistake by Al Golden and the defensive staff to kind of drop everybody back, give up soft coverage, and allow Egbuka to secure that catch there right at the 1 yard line to convert on 3rd and long. Then the final 2 snaps with 10 defenders on the field. Now, I understand that they, had a substitution deal and they were in a nickel dime there on the 3rd and long. And then they couldn't get another defensive lineman in the game or whatever the excuse may be. That just can't happen. They got away with it, by the way, on the first play because they tried to roll it right and had an incompletion. You can't have it let happen twice in a row. You just can't. You have 2 plays to figure it out. I don't care if the extra defensive lineman that's on the sideline that's waiting to be substituted, have him just run in there and push the quarterback. Oh, well, hey, personal foul, unsportsmanlike conduct, personal foul, roughing the passer, whatever. Who cares? Like, you're going to give up 18 inches. So, all right, is it worth it to play defense with 10 guys, or would you rather have the penalty with 3 seconds left that's going to give them 18 inches? Thought that was a huge mistake. I know you didn't have a timeout. I know in a perfect world you would have, but take the penalty by all means. And you say, well, how do I tell the guys to take a penalty? I don't know. J.D. Bertrand's the smartest linebacker in college football. He probably knew that there were 10 guys on the field. Tell him to go tackle the center before he snaps it. Whatever it is. So thought that was a real big mistake as well. But here's my biggest issue. Marcus Freeman's the head coach of Notre Dame. Notre Dame. His first head coaching job is at Notre Dame. It's a remarkably difficult spot to be thrust into. If he makes a mistake as the head coach of Georgia Southern, if he makes a mistake as the head coach of Utah State, if he makes a mistake as the head coach of Central Michigan, nobody's talking about it. Nobody. But because some of his mistakes are on national television with 10, 11, 12 million people watching, they're going to be highlighted and they're going to be blown up. Guess who also made mistakes early in his tenure because he took over as a first-time head coach at a big-time program? That'd be Kirby Smart. And a lot of the same conclusions are being made and jumped to by people that follow the sport about Marcus Freeman, the same way they were jumped to about Kirby Smart. Kirby Smart in 2021 was still having to defend the decision to start Stetson Bennett over JT Daniels, who's now on School 4, by the way, at Rice. I mean, people didn't trust him to make the quarterback decision. I don't trust him, man. He botched the Jake Fromm, Justin Fields situation. He botched the Justin Fields, Jacob Eason situation. And now he's botching the Stetson Bennett, JT Daniels situation. Well, Kirby Smart was right and has now won 2 straight championships. And now people are saying, well, hang on a second. No, he's the best. He's surpassed Saban. He's the GOAT. Don't jump to conclusions too early on coaches that are still trying to find themselves. And then if we want to go one step deeper, that was a personnel decision, all right? No one's criticizing Marcus Freeman for his personnel decisions, talking about his in-game strategy and maybe some of the decisions that he made. Well, let's go back to an in-game decision that Kirby Smart made that he got destroyed for. How about in 2018, playing against Alabama with a lead in the SEC championship game, they call a fake punt on 4th and 7. Justin Fields is the personal protector. Alarm bells going off. The backup quarterback's in on punt. What the heck is that? Well, Bama recognized it. They stopped the fake punt, gave Jalen Hurts, who was the backup quarterback at the time, because Tua Tagovailoa got hurt, gave him the short field. He goes down. They ultimately win the game. And people crushed Kirby Smart for that. They also crushed his second half plan in the 2017 national championship game. Oh, well, Tua Tagovailoa came in. They were built to defend Jalen Hurts, and they totally messed up. They totally messed up their second half plan. They allowed deep ball passing. They allowed them to throw it over their head. They allowed them to get behind him. I mean, people were killing Kirby Smart, questioning him, saying, this guy can't do it. He can't do it in the big game. Not a big game guy. Well, fast forward now, 5 years down the road, the guy's got not 1 but 2 national championships, and his team currently has a 21-game winning streak. So I understand Marcus Freeman made mistakes in the game. The guy can coach. Give it time. He's just at a place where every mistake is on the biggest possible stage. And that's a tough spot to be in. You don't get the training wheels that you get sometime at some other jobs when you first get a head coaching gig. So he's going to be great. He's going to be fine. I'm not concerned about it whatsoever. Takeaway number 3. As much as coaches want to say, oh, we're focused on us. We're thinking about us. We're talking about us. It's all about what we do. It's not about it. Outside perception doesn't matter. Outside noise doesn't matter. That is completely untrue. These coaches are so aware of what's being said about their program that it's almost pretty amazing, to be honest with you. It really is. And a lot of this is going to center around Ryan Day. Let's take a listen to what Ryan Day had to say after his team fights their way back and ultimately wins the game against Notre Dame.
I'm really upset and disrespected by what Lou Holtz said publicly about our team and Ohio State and Buckeye Nation. And we're not going to stand for that, because that's not even close to true. We had one bad half. couple years ago up in Ann Arbor. We did in the second half. But every game we play in, we're physical. We are. I don't know where that narrative comes from.
All right. He, of course, takes shots at Lou Holtz in that. And Lou Holtz, here's the quote that Lou Holtz had earlier in the day. Quote, he has lost to Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, Michigan twice, and everybody beats him. Does so much because they're more physical than Ohio State, and I know Notre Dame will take the same approach. Okay, I disagree with what Lou Holtz said in regards to Ohio State's physicality. We've talked about this in the past. I think there's a perception, I think there's a narrative about teams that rely so much on quarterback play, teams that rely so much on great personnel at wide receiver. There's a perception that those teams are soft. It's not accurate. If you run the ball down people's throats, everyone thinks you're tough as nails and physical as can be. Iowa is a good example. Oh, they're as tough as can be, as physical as it gets. Well, I saw the toughest team ever in Iowa get completely manhandled throughout the course of the game by Penn State, who, by the way, has had to deal with that label in the past as well. They're not soft. Look at their game against Michigan last year. Gave up 1 million rushing yards. That team's not good against the run. Just because you have great wideouts, just because you have elite quarterback play, doesn't mean you're soft. And I'll go take it one step further. I look at Ohio State, and I look at how they're playing on defense, and we'll talk about their defense here again in a minute. But I think Ohio State's always been extremely physical. Now, some groups are maybe more physical than others, and that's okay. Like every year, the team's a little different. Every year, the team's built, the way a team attacks or the way a team defends is going to be a little different than the year before and the year before that. And granted, yeah, things didn't go real well against Michigan last year. But if you really look at the game, first half, it's kind of like big plays given up by Ohio State. Missed tackles in the perimeter that led to the onslaught that came in the second half where they just got gashed in the second half of that football game. Ohio State's physical. They're a physical team. Are they the most physical team? Who cares? Ryan Day's won a lot of football games. A lot of football games. But there are areas where they can still improve. Like, for instance, let's use this as an example. Okay? They were 2 of 6 on third and short yardage plays. Third and fourth or short, they were 2 for 6. They were 0 for 2 on the fourth and short plays, including running a jet sweep on 4th and 1 or 4th and 2. For the last couple years, Ohio State has kind of struggled in short yardage situations. That can, by some, be an indicator of a team that maybe struggles to gain the tough yardage. I'm not saying it's fair. I'm not saying it's accurate, but some of the conclusions that people have come up with, there's stats to kind of back it up. But I think everybody's opinion, or at least their opinion should now have changed based on what we saw this past weekend. They went toe-to-toe against a blue-collar, physical football team and weathered the storm. Ohio State is always going to be a group that relies on big plays. Ohio State is always going to be a group that thrives when their offense is clicking. But they proved on Saturday that they can win a bunch of different ways. And that was important, I think, for the world to see. So if you still are of the belief that Ohio State is not physical, if you are still of the belief that Ohio State is a well-oiled machine on the perimeter, but maybe a bit of a work in progress along the line of scrimmage, both offensively and defensively, just hold your judgment for the time being. While the offensive line has had their fair share of ups and downs even this year, collectively, that group played their tail off for the most part in a game against a very good defense. So I have a ton of respect for Ohio State. I also have a ton of respect for Notre Dame. But I don't think we necessarily need to acknowledge the fact that, man, everyone thinks we're soft, so I'm going to address it in the postgame. Ryan Day doesn't have anything to prove to anybody. He's a great coach. Neither does Dan Lanning, who clearly was listening to the outside noise based on what he was saying there at halftime with Katie George saying, we're not done yet. There's a million examples of that. So I'll wrap it up with this. Coaches are very aware of what's being said about their program. And I think it's perfectly fair for them to address it when they have the microphone, they have the stage. If they want to address it and dispel some notions and throw some jabs along the way, I got no issues with it whatsoever. Hey, college football fans, I'm going to let you in on a little secret that will help you win game days this season. Eckrich smoked sausage. You're probably asking yourself, Greg, could it be that easy? Absolutely it is. Eckrich smoked sausage is crafted with a perfect medley of spices for a truly rich, savory taste. They are delicious all by themselves or in any recipe you can dream up. If the word recipe sounds like a lot of work, don't worry. Visit Eckrich.com for dozens of simple, mouth-watering recipes, making your tailgate prep a stress-free event. So there you go. Eckrich smoked sausage is the secret to winning game days. You can thank me later. Visit Eckrich.com for more. Takeaway number 4. We all dream about being offensive coordinators, right? You guys play video games. I play video games. My favorite thing in the world is dialing up a sweet play on Madden, or when the NCAA comes back, like I'm going to be dialed up, man. I'm going to get this little mesh route. I'm going to run this spider 2Y banana. I'm going to do all this other cool stuff. But sometimes, let's be real, offensive coordinators occasionally get just a little bit too cute. You know what I mean? Maybe I'm just, and look, hindsight's 2020. So when a play is, essentially ineffective, then it's too cute, right? It's too cute. Like mentioned a moment ago, Ohio State. And we're talking about Ohio State here. And I know short yardage plays dating all the way back to last year have been an issue for Ohio State. I understand that. They have not done great in those short yardage plays. Hey, guess what? Most recent, you're only as good as your last play. The last play Ohio State ran was a short yardage play that was successful. So let's just go with success on this point. But man, it's 4th and 1, 4th and 2, whatever it was, fourth and a long one. I don't care. And they try to go with the jet sweep. Now, here's the thing. Who is Ohio State's best player, pound for pound, outside of Marvin Harrison? And we might all have varying opinions on this. Okay, Marvin Harrison is their best player. Maybe you think Emeka Egbuka is their second best player. I'm not going to push back on that. I'm fine with that. But if I could have anybody on Ohio State's team not named Marvin Harrison, I want Cade Stover. That's the guy I want. He's a tone setter. He's tough as nails. I think he's a great teammate. He's super athletic. He's crazy strong. And on the jet sweep, right? In a perfect world, dude, pound it up in there, man. You're freaking Ohio State. Mow them over. Like, get those scarlet helmet or those scarlet jerseys with the silver helmets and gray helmets, whatever, and just mow them off the ball, right? But you got to respect the competition as well. But a jet sweep on 4th and 1, I just don't get it. I will never get it. But I will also say this. What are the odds of Cade Stover, your best pound-for-pound player, outside of Marvin Harrison, what are the odds of Cade Stover getting beat by a undersized nickel linebacker, Jack Kaiser, who made a ridiculous play? A ridiculous play. When Cade Stover has you like this, and he's blocked up, locked up, man, you got exactly what you want if you're the offensive coordinator. Well, Jack Kaiser was able to get to the outside and beat Cade Stover across his face. You know how hard that is to do? It's almost impossible. But it's still kind of cute, man. Like, maybe I'm just old school. Maybe I'm just crazy. Maybe I'm just, the oldest 35-year-old in the history of the world. You're Ohio State. Get in the T formation, in the wing T formation with 3 backs in the backfield. Penn State's been using it. Everybody's been using it, by the way. Notre Dame used it a couple times, by the way, with that lead that they used after they motioned out. They ran that a couple times. Get in that formation and mow people over with 2 dudes out in front, one of them being Stover, and get that tough yard. Okay? No more jet sweeps on 4th and 1. Tommy Rees at Alabama. You're on the goal line. You just block a punt. 1 yard line. Your center, by the way, has had 4 bad snaps this year, maybe more. Well, airmails it over the quarterback's head. Let's take a huge loss. Now it's 3rd and 18, 2nd 18, whatever, from the 18-yard line. If you just go under center, T formation, I don't care. QB sneak, I don't care. Do the Jalen Hurts. Motion 2 guys right in behind the quarterback and get in a line and just push that quarterback across the goal line. And what's the worst that can happen? Okay, can you fumble a snap under center? Of course you can. Absolutely can happen. But I'm so fed up with the shotgun plays for 1 yard line. Like, I am over that. Unless all you do in your offense is shotgun, and your center has never snapped under center in his life, I want you under center at the goal line. Always. Always. Now, I don't care what you run. Under center at the goal line. Because guess what? The distance that ball has to travel from the center's right hand or left hand to his behind is about 4 feet, 3 feet. Well, it's traveling 20 when you're 5 yards deep in the shotgun. So I don't get it. I just will never understand that. Another thing, and we'll put a bow on it with this. We've moved to an RPO world. Okay? I understand that we moved to an RPO world. The Clemson Tigers are sitting there in overtime against Florida State. And a lot of these offenses are called with options for the quarterback. Run-pass option. You can run it. You can pass it. Those are your options. RPOs, okay? Well, sometimes, and we've seen other teams deal with this. I remember Bama went through this 2 years ago at Texas A&M where they're on the goal line and they gave Bryce Young an RPO and he decided to throw it. And he should have just handed it. Running back would have hit his head on the goalpost. Instead, he tries to throw it. Incomplete. They kick a field goal. End up losing the game. Sometimes you just don't need to put the RPO on there at all. Why? Because you don't want the quarterback to have the freedom to screw it up. Cade Klubnik's a young player. He's a really young player. If Cade Klubnik was Sam Hartman or a veteran that had been around forever and understands down and distance situational football, on 3rd and 1, after Will Shipley just churned out a 9-yard gain on his first carry of overtime, yes, you have a nice look to the boundary to be able to throw to your wide receiver. Maybe he makes a play, maybe he doesn't. But he's 3 yards behind the line of scrimmage. And Florida State's defensive back did an amazing job of recognizing it immediately, closing and making the play, dropping the receiver for a 1-yard loss. Now you go from 3rd and 1 to 4th and 2, and you're kind of in no man's land as an offensive coordinator. You kind of have to throw it. You're not really super comfortable running it at that point. So they decide to throw it. Ball's tipped. 6'5" player, Patrick Payton, gets a hand on it. Game over. Stop tagging RPOs in short yard situations. Okay? Tell your quarterback. If Cade Klubnik was a 5th-year, 6-year player, he understands, you know what? Hey, it's 3rd and 1. We're going to run it twice. At worst, we get stopped on the first one, run it a second time. I trust my offensive line. Man, I definitely trust my running back to get that tough yard. All right? Hand it off. Like, Cade Klubnik needs to understand down and distance and situational football better, for sure. But don't give him the freedom by tagging the RPO when you should you just want him to hand the ball off inside. So, a lot of cuteness with offensive coordinators. And look, I can't do a better job. I'm not an offensive coordinator. I don't make millions of dollars, calling plays. It's not my, that's not what I do. But I just think sometimes, man, we get way too cute. Way too cute. Takeaway number 5. There's 3 things. More often than not, there are 3 things that are going to determine the outcome of the football game. It doesn't matter if the final score is 63-61. It doesn't matter if the final score is 7-3. There are 3 things that determine the outcome of the football game. More often than not. Turnovers, explosive plays, and conversions. It's that simple. Third down, fourth down conversions, explosive plays given up, turnovers. Let's talk about Clemson. Back to that game for a minute. Clemson's rolling. They really at that point were the better team in the game. They were outplaying Florida State. They had the home field behind them. Cade Klubnik's in a great spot. They're moving the ball. They're on the plus side of the 50. Things are looking really good for Clemson. Maybe looking at a situation where they might put this thing on ice. Well, Adam Fuller, defensive coordinator of Florida State, understands, hey, man, these guys are rolling. We got to do something. We got to go after them. Well, Phil Maffa, the running back, and I saw this. I was on the call. I saw Phil Maffa, and I saw Cade Klubnik's body language. People were like, he's got to feel pressure. Cade Klubnik, and I'm just telling you as a quarterback, you know that with that protection, you're covered unless it's an all-out blitz. You know you're protected unless it's an all-out blitz. So Cade Klubnik sitting there, you see when quarterbacks are just completely shocked when they get hit, that's because somebody in the protection blew it. They messed up. Now, if a guy gets beat in a one-on-one situation, like quarterback's probably going to see that, feel that, do something about that. But when you have that protection called, you know that unless it's flat top, all-out, full, engage 8 pressure, you're good. Well, they faked it inside. Phil Maffa looked at the Mike linebacker, and then he refused to scan for the linebacker that was coming off the right-hand side. He gets out in his route. This guy's coming at 100 miles an hour, scot-free. Boom, sack fumble. Kalen DeLoach picks it up, takes it to the house. Turnover. One turnover in the game for Clemson, and it was all she wrote. Later in the game, we already talked about it. 4th down stop for Clemson. It was all she wrote. How about the Ohio State situation? Turnovers, explosive plays were basically the entire outcome of the game. Ohio State gained 126 yards rushing in the game. 126. But 61 of those 126 came on one play. The Travion Henderson rushed to the left. He's out the gate, missed a tackle. Boom. Hit your head on the goalpost, strike up the fight song. One play. All it takes is one. Ohio State couldn't do anything on the ground for the most part. Boom. One play. Complete difference maker. Fast forward a little later in the game. All right. Notre Dame blows a coverage. We kind of talked about Xavier Johnson, how he's a factor in the game. Talked about it. Go check Thursday's show. Say, hey, remember this guy. Keep an eye on this guy. He's not a freak. He's not a superstar. He's probably 4th or 5th on the list of great weapons that at wide receiver that Ohio State has. But he's going to be a difference maker in the game. Keep an eye on him. They bust a coverage. They don't roll the safety down. He's one-on-one. Hits an easy slant. Boom, out the gate, 40-yard gain. All right, out of there. Big play. By the way, conversely, you look at the big plays created by Notre Dame's offense, there were very few. Very few. So they couldn't really get things going. Then we talk about turnovers. Already talked about the turnover aspect of it. Very clean game between these two teams. But how about the 4th down conversion attempts? Those two teams were a combined 0 for 4 on 4th down until the final drive. 0 for 4 on 4th down until the final drive. Of course, the goal line stand, the jet sweep that we've talked about already for quite a while, the QB sneak by Hartman, the early in the game where he's scrambling, he's a little bit short. They reviewed it and everything, thought he got it, whatnot. Short, 0 for 4 on 4th down. Well, the 4th down that really determined the game was the 4th and 7. They obviously convert. It was a great job by Igbuka, understanding the line to gain. He falls forward, they get a conversion. Still to this day, it doesn't matter how much the game has changed and how much things have been altered and how many things have been addressed and all these other things. The game always comes down to a few very important plays, always. And more often than not, it's going to be conversion rate, 4th and 3rd down, turnovers, and if you give up explosive plays, they're backbreakers. That was the outcome of the game for Ohio State. That was the outcome of the game for Clemson. And as a result, Notre Dame, they didn't make those 4th down conversions, and they gave up the explosives. They come up on the losing end. Clemson has the one bad turnover in the game. They were rolling offensively. Next thing you know, it's a completely different animal. So really always comes down to those 3 things. Doesn't matter how much the game has changed. Takeaway number 6. Another thing I learned. They have long been a punching bag. For a long, long time. But guess what? They're not this year, guys. They're not. The ACC is really good. The ACC is really, really good. And how much fun is it, by the way, to have the ACC looking as strong and as deep as they are right now? And we have already, for the last several weeks, talked about how great the Pac-12 is. Like, I would marry the Pac-12 right now if I wasn't happily married. Like, that's how much I love that contingent of teams. But I'm telling you right now, guys, I love what the Big Ten's doing. I think they have 3 teams that I would have ranked in the top 7. I think the AP might have that as well. Love what the Big Ten's doing. The ACC is painfully underappreciated. They have 6 teams that are 4-0. That's tied with the SEC back in 2012 for the most teams in a Power 5 conference to start 4-0 in a single season in the poll era. So dating all the way back to 1936. Duke and North Carolina are 4-0 for the first time, or the 4th time ever in the same season. The other instances were, who doesn't remember these? 1935, 1936, and 1971. Duke and North Carolina are legit. And now Duke, they're hosting College Game Day for the very first time. They deserve it, by the way. They're really good. You also think about, too, some of the other teams. Syracuse, big opportunity to prove it this week. Big opportunity. They got Clemson coming to their place. I think Syracuse is really good. And Syracuse, by the way, has played Clemson well in the past. So very, very encouraged by that. Very encouraged by that. But the ACC, top to bottom, they have long been a laughingstock. You cannot laugh at the ACC right now. Miami's legit. North Carolina's legit. Duke's legit. Florida State's the real deal. I'm sure there's probably a team or two I'm leaving off here. Louisville's a problem. They're not getting the respect they probably deserve. I'm telling you, man, the ACC top to bottom, it's not going to get the headlines at the Big 12. It's not going to get the headlines of the Big 10. It's not going to get the headlines of the SEC. But do not sleep on the ACC. I'm loving what they're doing right now. Number 7, Washington is the best state for quarterbacks in college football. Now, there's other options here too, by the way. All right, there's a lot of other options. Some good quarterback play being had right now in the state of Texas. There's some good quarterback play being had right now in the state of Florida. There's good quarterback play being had right now in the state of North Carolina with Riley Leonard at Duke. I mean, there's a bunch, by the way, in North Carolina that you can choose from. So there's a bunch out there for sure. But Washington is hands down right now the best state in college football if quarterback play is your thing. I think Oregon might be in the mix too, even though DJ has certainly had his fair share of ups and downs. We know Bo Nix is the real deal. We know California, by the way, real deal. All right. Even though not as sold on what UCLA had at quarterback this past weekend based on the performance against Utah, but more on that here in just a minute. Michael Penix is now the favorite to win the Heisman Trophy, and rightfully so. I'm glad people are starting to take notice, man. The throws that this guy executes. Watch the game against Cal. Cal did not have terrible coverage. They did not have terrible coverage at all. He's throwing guys open. Guys are adjusting on the fly. I mean, the throw that he made to the left corner of the end zone, I believe Rome Odunze was the guy that was on the receiving end. The way Rome Odunze adjusted his body and caught that pass is just ridiculous, guys. The windows that he's attacking are insane. Insane. He's the second FBS player in the last 25 years with 300 passing yards, 300 passing touchdowns, 70% completion in each of the team's first 4 games. The other guy that did that was Bailey Zappi back in 2021. And Bailey Zappi, of course, playing for Western Kentucky. So he's the only Power 5 player to do it. And they've beaten now 2 Power 5 teams, Michigan State, and obviously they've beaten what I think is a better Cal team than what people would probably realize. This guy is unconscious right now. He is unconscious. And his receiving core, they're ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. But don't sleep on Cam Ward. Do not sleep on Cam Ward. They brought in a new offensive coordinator. They want to stretch the field. They want to be more Tennessee. They want to get a little more aggressive down the field. They've done that this year, and my goodness, has he responded beautifully. How about the first half performance against Oregon State? All right. How do you like 19 of 20? Okay. That's the highest completion rate in the first half against an AP-ranked opponent in the last 20 years with a minimum of 15 attempts. His performance in the first half this past weekend was off the charts, ridiculous good. He's thrown for nearly 1,400 yards. He's got 0 interceptions. He's the 4th most by a player without throwing an interception through his first 4 games in the last 20 years. And here's what his head coach had to say after the game. Quote, "I think Cam deserves to be mentioned with the best quarterbacks in the country, period. I think he continues to show that. And I think nationally we undervalue him for what he's doing." Coach Dickert, I could not agree more. If you're not watching Washington State right now, you are doing yourself a disservice. This kid transferred up from Incarnate Word last year, had some really good moments and some moments that were forgettable. Obviously, a huge learning curve jumping up to the Power 5. But this year, he's unconscious and will continue to, I think, play at a ridiculously high level. So Washington, the great state of Washington, the Apple Cup, ladies and gentlemen, there's going to be some fireworks at season's end. Hey, college football fans, whether you're on the field or in the stands, make sure you're well protected, like having a solid defense to shut down that wide receiver in the final quarter, opening lanes for your running backs to do their thing, and of course, reliability when protecting your quarterback, because great coverage is a game changer. That's why Allstate provides that same protection off the field, giving you reliable coverage and game-winning protection for everything that matters, helping you stay game day ready every day. So get protected with Allstate. Visit allstate.com or call a local agent today to learn more. Brought to you by Allstate. You're in good hands. Insurance coverage is subject to terms, conditions, and availability. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates, Northbrook, Illinois. Takeaway number 8. Is this actually the year that defense wins championships again? I know it's like a crazy thought, but remember we used to always say defense wins championships, offense sells tickets. So we always said that, right? And as an offensive guy, I always resented that notion. Like, we're kind of important. Right? Kind of. I mean, maybe not that important, but like, we're pretty important. Maybe on the teams I played for weren't that important. Like, hey, just don't screw it up. All right. But I'm telling you, y'all, defense is coming back. It's coming back in a big way. Here's some of the teams that are at the top of the total defense marks. Penn State, number 1 in the Power 5 in total defense. How about the performance? Iowa had a stretch in this game where they went 3 and out 6 out of 7 drives. All right. They held, and I understand that Iowa has a lot of struggles offensively. I know they were a little shorthanded, but anytime you hold a quarterback to 5 of 14 for 42, and 36 of those yards came in the first quarter alone with 2 completions of 20 and 12 yards, I would say you're in pretty good spot. Iowa finished the game 17 carries for 20 yards. Now, when you take into account sacks, obviously that factors in, but 3 yards per carry if you take out the sacks. I mean, they have been playing ridiculous. Forced 4 fumbles in the game. Just constantly harassed Cade McNamara. Had 5 interceptions 2 weeks ago against Illinois. 5 turnovers, 4 interceptions 2 weeks ago against Illinois. Defense for Penn State is playing as well as anybody in college football, and the numbers reflect that. How about Michigan? Number 2 in the Power 5 in total defense. I know we haven't necessarily seen them play against top-tier competition. That day will come. But they just held Rutgers to 122 yards. I mean, how about just 32 yards in the run game? They outgained them running the football 180 to 32. All right. Just unbelievable. And then the final 3 quarters of the game, they outpossessed Rutgers 31 to 13, 31 to 14 or so. So like 31-04 to 13-56, what have you. And that is complete and utter domination defensively. How about Ohio State? We've talked about them, what they've done on defense this year. It's been incredible. They're 4th right now in the Power 5 in total defense. Notre Dame, they're 5th in the Power 5 in total defense. You hold that team, Notre Dame, you keep Marvin Harrison in check. Maybe he was a little banged up, what have you, but you help him in check for the most part. Like Egbuka had a big day. But Notre Dame's playing ridiculous on defense. They're 5th in the Power 5 in total defense. Utah, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? They're 7th right now in the Power 5 in total defense. And, I mean, you look at Junior Tafuna, all right, Keanu Tanuvasa has been a complete difference maker. These two defensive tackles, man, I mean, they were just destroying UCLA's offensive line. You look at the edges, Jonah Ellis and Logan Fano, like these guys are just, they combined for 16 tackles and 4.5 sacks, generated consistent pressure on Dante Moore. We talked about it last week. We said, man, I'm going to tell you this. Dante Moore does not handle pressure well. He's a young quarterback, and my goodness, did he struggle. I mean, he struggled. And that defensive line, man, gold star for the Utah defensive line. They're relentless, absolutely relentless, and have played so incredibly. 4-0 right now with their out there starting quarterback and their best offensive weapon. It's absurd. And to win a game in dominant fashion the way they did is ridiculous. Oregon, 9th in the Power 5 in total defense. We already kind of talked about them. But, I mean, Jordan Burst, Casey Rogers, I mean, just bull rushing their way into the backfield. They look at the back end. Kyrie Jackson really held Xavier Weaver in check. He blanketed pretty much everyone he played. I mean, Alabama's finding themselves defensively. They've allowed 13 points the last 2 games. Miami's had some dominant moments defensively. Florida's been amazing on that side of the ball as well. They're number 3 in total defense in the Power 5. Defense might actually win championships this year, ladies and gentlemen, because you think about the playoff contenders right now in the world. They're all playing really good defense. They're all playing really good defense. I didn't even list Georgia, and we know they're going to play good defense. That's for sure. Takeaway number 9. The SEC West is a 3-horse race, and all those teams have some flaws. Let's think about LSU. When Jaden Daniels is on, they're a very difficult team to beat. I mean, he had a rough first half against Arkansas. No one's doubting that. He just wasn't on his game, okay? But when he's going, man, I mean, they're going to be a little bit up and down from time to time. They were last year. They're probably going to be again this year. Malik Neighbors, unbelievable. Brian Thomas is continuing to emerge as a legit number 2. And then you think about the front 7 defensively. I mean, this was a group that was dominating against Mississippi State. Well, what the heck happened? I mean, the Hogs scored on their final 5 possessions, which is something that's really concerning. We know the secondary is not great, but the front 7, that's got to be the calling card of LSU with the talent that they have in the front 7. It hasn't been the case, man. Just very inconsistent. Alabama's another team that, hey, a ton of mistakes. McElroy had a bad interception, but I thought he really did a nice job in the second half of that football game. There were some bad sacks taken. Okay, like, you know, on the 3rd and 5, you lose 9 yards to, you know, from the 21-yard line. Now the field goal is a 48-yarder, which Will Riker made, but I mean, that's not a guarantee. Seth McLaughlin snapping it over his head. They've had a handful of poor snaps. He had 4 low snaps against Texas. Against Ole Miss, he sent one a little low, sent one over the top, and then he also had a bad snap against Middle Tennessee that McElroy bailed out and turned into a 20-yard touchdown, but still, and that's been a little bit problem. So they just have a lot to clean up. There's still some penalties. They've been better in that regard, but it's still something they got to address. I mean, McElroy's got to, I think, do a little bit better job in coverage. I think he sometimes still predetermines, but I thought he looked much more comfortable in the second half. The offensive line is still very much a question mark. 4 sacks given up on Saturday. That brings the season total to 16. Not all of them, by the way, were on the offensive line, I might add. But I think the biggest concern is that, man, this is still a run-imposing group, right? Like, they're going to pound the ball. They're going to do that well. They had 131 yards on 45 carries. That's 2.9 per carry. And when you adjust for sacks, they had just 160 yards for 3.9 yards a carry. That's not what you want, okay? And then one more thing, on gains, on runs that went for 0 yards or yards for a loss, that happened 7 times in their rushing attempts. Yeah, in the sacks, that's 11 of Alabama's 64 plays. So 17% of their plays went for 0 or negative yards. That's not what you want. So they got to be more efficient. But here's the thing about Alabama. The defense is really rounding into form, man. They are really starting to get it going on that side of the ball. I think you recognize, hey, 5 defensive linemen had a huge impact in the game on this past weekend. Deontay Lawson goes down in the second quarter, and you see the depth of Trez Marshall, Jahad Campbell, Kendrick Blackshear to kind of fill in. So they clearly have some depth at that position. And then the back end, after what was an unrecognizable performance a couple weeks ago against Texas, they're starting to find themselves. I mean, Kool-Aid McKinstry the last 2 weeks has been off the charts. Terrion Arnold, I think he led the team, by the way, with 8 tackles, broke up a couple passes, had the interception. That group in the back end, I think as we continue to move forward, has a chance to be a legit unit, an elite unit there in the secondary. So that's going to be a huge factor. And then A&M, who I think is very much in the mix in the SEC West. Okay, Connor Wigman going down in the ankle injury. I have not seen an update as of right now. That's something to be concerned about. What we talked last week, the most important position right now in college football that you could seriously make a legit argument about might be the backup quarterback, the most unheralded position. But Max Johnson goes in, doesn't miss a beat. I mean, he had his first 5 attempts for 115 yards and really broke the game open in a lot of ways. Well, granted, they're going against really rough quarterback play on the other side. Both Peyton Thorne, Robbie Ashford missing a lot of open guys. It was not good. But you think about where Aggies have been the last couple of weeks on third down. Man, they are ridiculous on third down. They allowed Auburn to just 3 of 15 on third down. If you look back the last 2 weeks, they've allowed 4 of 37 on third down. I mean, that is ridiculous. 11% overall on third down conversions. I mean, they've successfully converted everyone they've played, even in the Miami game. They're giving up just 20% on third down, 10 of 49 overall. So they're playing really good situational football, and they can really get after the quarterback. They had 7 sacks in the game this past weekend, and that was the most obviously generated by an Aggie team since 2017. So there's 3 teams right now in the SEC West that I think are good. They all, I think, have some flaws, but I also think it's going to be really interesting to see how much better these teams get as the season progresses. And then the final takeaway. The Mountain West is better than the American, ladies and gentlemen. Like, I know forever the American has been considered the top G5 conference, and it's been hard to push back to. They've long had their champion representing the G5 in the New Year's Six, whether it's UCF, Cincy, Houston, Tulane. But this year, there's been 2 teams that have impressed me from the American so far. One is Memphis. The other is Tulane. SMU has failed to look good against either of their Power 5 opponents. They played OU and TCU, obviously 2 solid teams, but they didn't look great. Only 2 teams right now in the American are above 500. 7 of their teams are 1-2 or worse, and collectively they have a 42% winning percentage in the American right now. They are 1-20 against the Power 5. 1-20 against the Power 5. That one win was, of course, Rice's win against Houston a couple weeks ago. Meanwhile, here's the Mountain West. The Mountain West are 4-17 against the Power 5. It's not great, okay? It's not great, but it's a whole heck of a lot better than 1-20. They also have 2 wins by Fresno State. They're appropriately ranked in the top 25 against P5 competition. Overall, they have a 500 record. That's the collectively as a conference, which I think is really good. They have 5 teams that are below 500, which is not ideal, but one of those teams is Colorado State, who gave Colorado a couple weeks ago all they wanted. Air Force is 4-0. Fresno State is 4-0. They obviously beat Purdue and have looked pretty dang good. Wyoming's 3-1 with a win against Texas Tech, and they had Texas tied going into the fourth quarter. UNLV beaten SEC team. So the Mountain West right now, albeit it's not going to necessarily generate the buzz that it has in the past, but the Mountain West is superior through 4 weeks to the American and have performed a lot better in some of the big matchups on their card. You smell that? That's the scent of fresh turf and freshly cracked Dr. Pepper, which can only mean one thing. It's college football season. So block off your Saturdays and swipe a sweet Dr. Pepper from the mini fridge, because there's a new season of high kicks, long throws, and Fansville commercial breaks to carry you all the way to the West Coast games. That's right. The fans are back, and this year things are heating up. We're talking about hot takes, more heartbreak, more layers of face paint. Get ready to drink in all the drama this season with the help of the most delicious college football tradition there is, Dr. Pepper, the one fans deserve. That'll do it for us here at Always College Football. Make sure you follow the show on social media at AlwaysCFB. Submit your questions, because on Wednesdays, we always do our mailbag, and we get those questions not from the email traditionally. We used to do the email. We still do the email. So you can continue sending your questions to alwayscollegefootball@gmail.com. But if you can submit questions on our social media by following AlwaysCFB, or you can follow me at Greg McElroy, we will answer your questions on a Wednesday edition of Always college football. That'll do it for us. We love you guys. We appreciate you guys. Continue to like, rate, and subscribe. For all of us here at Always College Football, for Mark, Jake, Jack, I'm Greg, with also special thanks to our contributor. We have a very special guest with us the last couple days. We wouldn't be able to put the show on without this young man. So Cohen, you're the wind beneath our wings, my friend. We appreciate you. Big Baylor fan, by the way. Reeling a little bit after the performance this weekend, but we love you, Cohen. Thanks for being with us, and that'll do it here on a Monday edition of Always College Football. Check back with us on Wednesday for another great show, and remember, it's always college football. Hey guys, it's Greg McElroy. Thanks for watching Always College Football. Make sure you like, rate, and subscribe to ESPN's YouTube channel and wherever you listen to your podcasts.